Yaksimush, people of the world. Welcome back to the Big Brave Show. That's right, the Big Brave Show. And we're going to tell you about a speech that Dawn gave recently.
Yes, I was in Poland, my very first time to go to that awesome country, really incredible people.
Dobrze.
And we had the opportunity to present PeaceJam to young people from high schools and universities throughout the Warsaw area. And the speech was really, really well received. People stayed for almost an hour afterwards, asking questions and pledging to take action. We wanted to share the speech with you today so it might inspire you too to stand up and speak out.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, Ryszard Kapuściński, whose literary heritage this lecture celebrates, once said, "We cannot understand our problems if we don't think of them at a global, planetary scale." Now, the extraordinary lady who's going to speak in a moment has not only thought on a global scale, she has been acting and working on a global scale for the past 2 decades, having already inspired millions of young people like you all over the world to perform what she calls simple acts of peace. She has now come to Warsaw to share her amazing story with us. She will also try to convince us that change starts here. So please welcome Dawn Engle.
It is so wonderful to be here in Poland. I've never been to Poland before, so I'm really happy to be here at this beautiful university. How many people had heard of Sir Joseph Rotblat before today? Raise your hand. So what an honor that we were able to work with him. He was so incredible. He was brilliant. Actually, we have 12 Nobel Peace Prize winners on our board at the time that he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and we were kind of afraid to go talk to him because he was so smart. You know, he was this brilliant scientist. We thought maybe he wouldn't be interested in working with us on peace education. And he was the most funny, witty man, but he would not let you get away with anything. If you were telling a story and trying to explain something, he would correct your facts, you know? He would make sure that you were just as precise with your thinking as he was. He was always making jokes. He had huge energy. I mean, he used to walk to work miles every day. When we met him, he was in his 90s, right? And he lived in London, as many of you know. I know one day he was on the subway and he was rushing to get to work, and some young people were in his way and kind of bumped into him. And they said, "Old man, you need to slow down." And he turned to them and he said, "Hey, I'm 90. I got to speed up. I got a lot of work left to do." And that was his approach. I mean, he was just, when you walked into his office, he had a little office right across from the British Museum, right? Has anybody ever been to London? So some of you may know where that beautiful British Museum is. So it was a little tiny office right across the street. And you would walk into his office and there were just stacks of books all around him. Like there was a little hole in the middle where he sat, right? But he had papers and reports all around him, and he wouldn't let anybody touch anything because he said, "I know exactly where everything is," right? So you couldn't, when you claimed the office, you couldn't move his books. PeaceJam, I'm not really doing my slides, am I? I'm talking about Sir Joseph. And I'm going to talk about him for a minute before I do any more slides, if you don't mind. Because he was somebody who, at great personal risk, decided to stand up for humanity. So, does anybody know his personal story? If you know that he worked on the Manhattan Project, creating the nuclear bomb. Had anybody heard that? Yeah. So, he's very brilliant. He's very young, not that much older than you. He is picked to be one of the top teams in the world to create a weapon that can stop the war in Europe. He lost his wife. He was in London working when Poland was invaded, and he never. She was one of the people who died with the invasion, and he never was able to see her ever again. So he's all very lonely. He's all by himself in London. He gets picked to work on this, the most brilliant scientist in the world, trying to create a weapon to stop Hitler, to stop the war, right? And he ends up in the United States, in Los Alamos, working, creating something extraordinary that no one ever thought could exist, where you would take these atoms and it would be a weapon that would be so terrifying that the world would say, no, we can't have war anymore. The war must stop. And they developed this weapon. There were German scientists who were working to develop a similar weapon as well, so it was kind of a race, right? They were racing to see how soon they could develop this weapon. And this team of international scientists that Sir Joseph Rotblat was part of, they created the weapon first. And he was like, yes, this will help us. This will help us to end the war. But once peace was declared in Europe, the decision was made by the US government to still use the weapon in Japan. And he thought that this was wrong. So just imagine yourself, you're part of one of the most prestigious groups of scientists in the world, and you put it all at risk to say, no, we should not use this weapon in Japan. This weapon is so terrifying and the radiation and the things that will happen to the deformed babies, we can end the war in a different way. We won the race, right? Hitler has been stopped. We don't need to use this weapon. And he was banned from the United States. I mean, it was a lot of courage to stand up and say, we have to work for different ways to end war and build peace, not just through the development of these terrifying weapons. So he was the first nuclear protester. He not only helped create the nuclear bomb, he was one of the first nuclear protesters in the world. He used to sit and do protests in front of the embassy in London. He used to sit in like a cardboard box. I mean, he was really ahead of his time, and he understood that there are two approaches: military security and human security. And it goes to the theme. I'm so thrilled to be here at the University of Warsaw for the Kapuscinski Development Lectures, to UNDP and to the European Commission, because all of the Nobel Peace Prize winners on our board believe that the very best way to have peace, to have security, is not to invest in more and more weapons. It is to invest in human security. And what do they mean by human security? They mean that every single human being deserves to have a job, a place to live, food to eat. They deserve health care, right? They deserve some dignity. And this is how to create real security in the world. So when we look at what's happening in Europe, all of the people who are part of PeaceJam are working to create this human security for everyone so that we can work together and not be afraid of each other and not be polarized and not be divided and not be blowing each other up with terrorist bombs and everything else, right? So working on human security is what Sir Joseph Rotblat believed in. And so he's continuing to be an influence for PeaceJam for young people around the world. Okay, so I just had to say that because I love the man so much. Okay, let's see. So we believe, and we have proven, that you can change the world. How many people agree with me? Okay. 16 million projects. 16 million projects have been created by young people just like you to tackle the toughest issues facing humanity, right? Climate change, eliminating extreme poverty, rights for women and girls, ending racism and hate, stopping the proliferation of weapons, clean water for everyone. There are 10 issues that our Nobel Peace Prize winners have chosen as the most important issues that we need to work on if we want to have a better future for all of humanity. And it's not just talk. Then we create projects to solve those problems in our communities. So PeaceJam is about education, inspiration, and action. Action is the most important part. And you can see that we're not talking about a project that's just at a surface level. We really try and focus on the root causes of the problem. So we have Nobel Peace Prize winners who are coming and working side by side with youth to mentor them. It's a year-long program where you have a chance to really learn about the life of a Nobel laureate. You get a chance to work side by side with that Nobel laureate. You get a chance to create a project that's really going to address the root causes of a problem in your community or someplace in the world, and to implement that project. Because it's easy to have a big idea, right? Big idea. That's easy. It's hard to implement an idea. It's hard to follow through and actually create change. So that's what we teach, and we help young people become empowered agents of change. And so these are the issue areas that we work in. It's very similar to the Sustainable Development Goals. We don't have quite as many categories, but it's all in there. So we're very much supporting the campaign that is being led by the United Nations. And actually, we have a goal of 1 billion, billion with a B, 1 billion acts of peace. And Google is our partner for this, and we're on our way. We just hit 16 million projects. By June, we expect to have 30 million. And you can be one of the ones who does a project. We actually will have a gathering with a Nobel Peace Prize winner in the United Kingdom in March, and another one in Monaco in June. And we will give prizes in Monaco every year to the very best projects in the world. So these are some of the tips for how to do a project. Picking your issue, making a plan, figuring out what you care about. I'm going through these quickly. You brainstorm an idea, and you take action. So you do not have to be a fancy person. You do not have to have a PhD in order to change your community or the world, okay? I'm from Detroit. I'm really happy to be here in Poland because so many of my friends growing up were Polish. My father worked for the auto industry. He was a factory worker. And so many people who worked in the factories of Detroit building the cars were from Poland. And my husband's from Bulgaria. And many Eastern Europeans were there, were my friends growing up. And I'm not nobody fancy. Ivan and I created this. It was his big idea, and we created it 23 years ago. But we're just a couple of factory worker kids from Detroit. So you don't have to be anything fancy. You have to be like Joseph Rotblat. You have to have a lot of heart. You have to have a lot of energy. You have to really believe. You have to have a lot of courage. But you don't have to be the fanciest person or the wealthiest person. You can be the smallest little person, and you can make a huge difference in the world. When I started my career as an economist, I'm an economist by training, I worked for the US Congress for 13 years. And again, I'm just a factory worker kid from Detroit, so when I had a chance to work for Congress, I had a really good work attitude. They would say, who will get us coffee? And I would say, I'll go get the coffee, right? Who will make the Xerox? I'll make the Xerox. Who will drive the senator? I will drive the senator. And for my internship, if you should take up this opportunity to do an internship. For my internship, I was hired. There was me from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which no one's ever heard of. And there was someone from Oxford, which you have heard of, and there was somebody from Harvard, right? There were three of us, and the one who got hired was me because I had a really good blue-collar work ethic, and no job was beneath me. So do those internships. You can do extraordinary things in the world. You make those connections. I ended up being the youngest woman ever appointed to serve as chief of staff for a U.S. senator. I rose all the way to the top. I did every single job in the office, and I just kept getting promoted. And I learned a lot about policy, about the way that things are done in Congress or maybe in the national governments here in Europe. A lot of it is top-down, and it's kind of like pushing on a string. You You think you're going to make a policy that's going to make a difference, and maybe it doesn't make any difference at all, or maybe it just helps a little bit, or maybe it has some bad effects you didn't expect. So I took everything that I learned from working for Congress and I used it to create something that was grassroots. Because I really believe that that's where the action is, at the community level. That's where we can solve the problems. And young people are a really important part of that campaign. So these are some of the awards that we're giving. And what we're doing is, yes, we have a new president in the United States who is kind of scary because he makes up his mind at 3 o'clock in the morning and tweets, oh, we're going to restart the nuclear war race. You know, it's kind of terrifying. So we'll see what happens. But for those of us who are worried about humanity and making the world a better place, I think the action is going to be at the community level. So that's why I have this slide up, because what we're trying to do is, through our PeaceJam programming and our Billion Acts of Peace campaign, is give you the tools so that you can become an empowered agent of change, and so that we can all work together on these issues on a local level. Even if our governments decide not to implement the climate change treaty, it's so, you know what? On a local level, we can work with our cities, we can work with our businesses, we can work with our NGOs, with our youth, with our universities. We can all come together. We can implement the accords out of Paris, right? So we don't have to sit around and feel helpless and hopeless. We can be actors ourselves. A lot of our governments are polarized and paralyzed. They can't act. And now some of them are acting in ways that are moving in a direction that maybe you don't agree with. You don't have to sit there and just wait for a better government to come along. You can get involved at a local level. You can work to create the change that you need to see. These issues need to be addressed. And that's what we are all doing together as part of the PeaceJam movement. And these are some of the examples of projects that we've done. I'll talk about the project that the young people in Greece are doing. In Greece, the Peace Jammers were worried when they heard that a lot of the refugees who were coming, some of them had no family members at all. They were young, they were your age, and they were all alone, and they were just arriving in Greece without any family at all. And they decided to work with these unaccompanied minors and these youth to help them, because they could be friends, right? They're the same age. They're just like us. They just had a bad thing happen in their country, and now they're someplace new with no one to help. So they worked with a nonprofit that's doing a lot of work with the newly arriving refugees in Greece, and they spent time with the young people who were newly arrived in little groups, and they asked them, what do you need? How can we help you? And they wanted things that maybe aid agencies weren't giving them. They wanted a backpack. You know, backpacks are really good. They wanted cell phones. They wanted things that teenagers want, right? And so they started putting together these life packs, these backpacks with all of these things for their new lives, and giving them and making friends and supporting them. Just one example of something that they were able to do just a couple miles from their home that's really making a difference in the future lives of many others. These are our PeaceJam youth conferences, and this is what I was talking about. We're truly inviting all of you today, and anybody who's listening to this live streamed, if you are interested in participating in March or in June, go to peacejam.org, and you can sign up. We'd love to get the program started here in Poland. And the way that we work is that we work to break down barriers between people. Here in Europe, there is a crisis now because there is a lot of division. There are many new refugees here, and people are afraid, communities are divided. And so in our PeaceJam conferences, we really work to bring people together, not just in a room like this, but imagine if you walked into this room and we put you into a group with 10 people who you had never seen before, 10 people you didn't know at all, and we had 2 university mentors who we had trained who facilitated your group, and you got to experience a whole weekend with the Nobel Peace Prize winner, but always with people you didn't know before, with trust-building games, with ice-breaking games, with team-building games. And by the end of the weekend, you would have 10 new friends, people you would have been afraid to talk to, people who seem very different from you. But by having a common experience together, people can learn how we have a common humanity. Even if somebody feels like the other, we are all really the same human spirit. And that's the way that we build peace. We model a peaceful community for a whole weekend. It's a model that brings peace and reduces violence in schools. It's a model that reduces violence in communities. And then it activates a whole new generation of young leaders who are committed to creating change in their communities and making the world a better place. So I just want to say one last thing. I was just at a very fancy event in St. Moritz, Switzerland. Have you ever heard of St. Moritz, Switzerland? Anybody? Okay, it's very fancy. And it was the UBS bank, the big bank in Switzerland that has more private wealth under management than any other bank in the world. So it was a lot of really rich people, and me, you know, at this place up in the mountains, beautiful, in a palace. We were in a palace. And these economists for the UBS bank are telling their very wealthy clients about the future and what to worry about. And this is what they said. They said that we're going to go through about 25 to 30 years of incredible upheaval and chaos and change. And you know why? The Industrial Revolution. You've heard of the Industrial Revolution, right? Around 1900, across the world, there was a change from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy, and there was a lot of aggregation of wealth. Some people got really rich, some countries got really rich, and some people got really rich, right? Some companies got really rich. And there was a whole backlash to that. There were a lot of things that came out of that. One of them was the Marxism, communism. One was the labor unions trying to fight back against that. There were a lot of people who were unhappy with the system, the governments that were in place. There was a lot of change. There was war. There were protectionist measures put in place, like the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which caused the Great Depression, and it gave rise to populist, strongmen leaders like Hitler and Mussolini and others, and we ended up with World War II, right? So you know that history. That's not new. We are undergoing the second industrial revolution. This is the new part. So somebody tell me, what is the second industrial revolution that we're undergoing right now? What do you think? In technology. Hashtag CAP talks, right? Think of all the change. Think of all the change that's happened because of technology. Think how you can search. Think of how all the robots are going to take all the jobs, right? Okay? Think about what's coming down the pike as a result of the whole world changing. I don't know if you have Uber here, Uber cars, right? So what does that mean for taxi cab drivers? There are self-driving cars. What does that mean? All these new things, what does it mean for what if robots can do a lawyer's job better than a lawyer, right? What are you going to do for your career? So there's a whole lot of change happening really fast right now because of technology. And we have an aggregation of wealth happening again. More so than ever, we have really a lot of wealth right at the top. And a lot of people are reacting to it, and that's why they say we're going to go through a period of great change. So the thing I'm going to leave you with is, It's an incredible opportunity. The Dalai Lama is one of the Nobel Peace Prize winners on our board, and he says, change is great because if the world was not always changing, we would be stuck with the way things are, right? But because the world is always changing, there's always the opportunity to make things better. And if we're about to go through a 25 to 30 year period of great chaos and upheaval, then we can be at the cutting edge of creating all of the new good things that are going to come out of that next 25 to 30 years, right? So with great change comes great opportunity. And if we all come together and believe in ourselves, we don't sit back and wait for politicians to decide it for us. We get activated ourselves at a community level. We work together to create the change we want to see and make better lives for all of us so we can all have some dignity and we can all have better lives and we can all live in peace. We can create an extraordinary new world out of the coming decades. And guess who's going to be the ones to do it? It's not me. I'm 60 years old, right? It's going to be you. You are the young leaders. So we need you. That's why the Nobel Peace Prize winners spend a lot of time with you, because they know that you're the ones who can change the world. Just like Sir Joseph Rotblat, this little boy. I mean, he was like 18. And he was smart, and people noticed, and he got some opportunity, and he used that education and opportunity to create change in the world. We did not have a nuclear war with the Soviet Union, largely because of the efforts of Sir Joseph Rotblat and his Pugwash Conference and all of the scientists who he brought together. And he said, if you're a scientist, if you can create something, you have responsibility to use it in a moral and ethical way. And for all of us, with the gifts that we've been given, we all have gifts to give. We need to use those in a moral and ethical way to create a better world. Thank you. Thanks.
People across the world are working for the world we want to see and the world we want to live in. It takes work. It takes some strength, it takes some guts, but we can all do it. And we know that you will do it, and we'd like to hear from you at 1billionactsofpeace.org. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next episode.